Yeah, yeah. Right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Democratic Service Committee meeting. The first item on the agenda is apologies.
Chair, sorry,
Peter Clark as well,
and Councillor Howard.
and Countess, right. Uh, the next item is declarations of interest. As and when? Right. Um, and the next item will be to elect a vice chair. Any nominations? Can you put it in the chat if you change your mind as we go down, please? And then there's at the last meeting, it was agreed to set up a working group, but has not yet met because of the election. Agreed date for working group to meet and feedback to the next meeting. Matt Phillips is going to introduce that, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. Hello, good afternoon, members. So Matt Phillips, Chief Officer, People and Governance here. So first of all, if you don't mind, Chair, I'm just going to say hello and thank you for having me. Obviously, since you last met, some of the portfolio responsibilities have changed around amongst members of the strategic leadership team. So now the entire function of democratic services falls under me, and that's why you've got me here joining you today. With regards to this particular item, I mean, they say never start with an apology, but I'm going to because forgive me, it's largely my fault that the working group hasn't managed to meet the intervening period between the last meeting and this. Obviously, you know, the team have been quite busy getting the elections sorted in the interim, but with the handover of responsibilities that happened just 2 months ago, I've been feeling my way into my new responsibilities, and this question around area committees has been one of those things that I've been kind of looking into. So apologies for the fact that the working group haven't managed to meet yet. I think we're in a good place now to get the first meeting in the diary, and I think, unless John corrects me, we're looking at doing so on the 28th of June. The details for that follow the meeting, but what this is for me is not just an opportunity to reflect on actually not just the change that's happened within the organisation in between your last meeting and this, but obviously the legislative change with the Local Government Elections Act 2021 coming into force and placing not only the onus on us as to how we do our meetings in the future, you know, the hybrid option of allowing remote attendance and just understanding how that might step into the wider community space. But it's also allowed us to think a little bit more broadly about what are the lessons that we've learned from the COVID period when we've carried out meetings in this fashion, and what is there on, you know, as we look ahead now and we consider the policy focus and the strategic direction of the organisation that we can actually learn from and bring to bear within the area committee space. So we're thinking things like, we know that climate change is going to be a fundamental part running, you know, following the declaration of the emergency that was made in council pre-COVID. That's going to run through policy terms just about everything that we do. So one of the kind of proposed elements of the architecture as to how you address climate change happens to overlap with the responsibility placed on us by the new Local Government Election Act to actively promote participation, engagement in democracy. So one of those proposals is, well, what place is there for citizens' assemblies, for example? Now, I'm not here posing that as a solution today, but it's just an example of one of those topics that could come out of the work that the working does. There's also the lessons that we've learned from the last, well, best part of a year and a half now, isn't it? Both from the flooding and then how that evolved into COVID. The Business Resilience Forum that's chaired by Francis O'Brien is a good example of that. Initially set up during the floods to ensure that businesses were engaged with us around some of the funding opportunities, but also some of the the abilities to influence what we were doing, disseminate information. That naturally evolved into a continuing forum that took place throughout COVID. And is there something to be learned from that kind of participation engagement that we could take learning from and integrate into area committees? Another one of the questions would be looking at how the clusters work and that engagement that happens in those spaces with our town and community councils. And that overlaps with the work that again actually sits in Francis O'Brien's space with under Kath Fallon, with regards to our community support networks. It's our fundamental design principles within Monmouthshire County Council to do with and not to our residents and our constituents. So lessons to be learned from how our community support network and our engagement that happens to Kath's remit could actually benefit us in the area committee space. So I think it's a really interesting time to be having a look at this, and there's a huge amount of not just kind of literature, but real-time learning we've had from the last year and a half between flooding, COVID, and various other things that can lean into the working group. So forgive me that it's not stood up yet. Hopefully, 28th of June we'll look to get that first meeting with the committee's approval. I'd like Kath Fallon a participant at meetings, because I think that interaction with the community network is going to be crucial for shaping those discussions. And beyond that, I'm happy to take any other questions at this point.
Members, is there any questions on what you've just been listening to? And are you happy with the 28th of June for this meeting to be set up? Quiet, eh? Right, thank you, Jamie. Yeah. Maureen Powell. Joanne Walker. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm having difficulties here, but yes, I'm happy with that.
Right, Sheila. Maureen, I gather you want.
I'm not actually a member of this committee, but I have asked permission to join the committee today, because following on from what Matt's been saying, I believe we're going to discuss area committee meetings because it's another get together. Matt didn't actually mention it, and that's why I come today, because having been chairman of the North Monmouthshire area committee for quite a while, I felt that I should come and attend and have a little bit of input possibly, and join the meeting for that. So I hope that's all right, Chair.
Of course it is, Maureen. You're welcome anytime. Right, if there's no further questions, and the majority of you are quite happy with the 28th of June, we'll carry on. Right. Pan? Diversity and local government, and I think John's going to speak on that.
Thank you, Chair. So back at the beginning of 2021, the WLGA Council had agreed that all local authorities in Wales, ahead of next year's all-out council elections, should be looking to sign up as a diverse council with a set of actions and commitments that each council should commit to, underpinning that, with obviously the aim to increase diversity in the level of candidates and elected representatives that end up in local authorities after the election. Some of the proposals within the commitment obviously tie in with the Local Government and Elections Act. So some of the proposals there are linking to job sharing for cabinet members, ensuring political group leaders maintain standards within their groups, making sure their members follow the code of conduct, etc. So this is something we've all been asked, all local authorities have been asked to do, but what is it that we actually are being asked of us? So there's a template action plan attached to the report for your consideration today, and whether that covers everything that we need to look at to commit to being a diverse council, whether there's extra things we want to put in that are local for us, and that we want to add into it. I think it's really important to consider that there are elements of the commitment that as a council we have little control over. So some of them are ensuring that political parties promote equality amongst the selection of candidates and put candidates in seats where they have the same chance of winning. We obviously have little say in that. We're the facilitator in the election process, not the mechanics in the background. So there's an element of it that's out of our control, but it's all linked into the same action plan. There's a recommendation there that we should look to appoint a diversity ambassador from each political group within the council to encourage those standards within each political group ahead, from now on and through to next year's elections. And I think it would make sense really if we did want to appoint those ambassadors that they come from Democratic Services Committee, so that at least we can get some feedback to us, and whether we need to consider changing our action plan and our commitments going forward. And then finally, obviously, once we've agreed an action plan, we need to make a recommendation to full council, that full council endorses this commitment, and that we sign up to it. So over to you, members. Really, like I say, the action plan is in the report. There are a lot of good points within the action plan, and I'm pleased really when it came out that we're actually already doing quite a lot of those things. There's some things we can improve on. There's some things we can do better, as always. But on the whole, there's little extra work we need to do that we haven't already planned in or are already doing, that would give us a commitment to be able to sign up to it. So I'll pass it over to members to see if they've got any questions or anything more they want to add in, and whether it's something that we want to endorse as a committee that we put towards full council.
Is there any questions?
Yeah, Joe.
Sorry, Joanne.
Thank you very much. I've read the report and I think it seems to have some good proposals, many of which it seems that we already do carry out in council. I'd like to see how we might be able to move forward to promote increasing diversity, because although Monmouthshire Council does better than many councils across Wales in having its proportions of women participants, we obviously have nobody from BAME communities as elected members within the council chamber. So that is an area in which we ought to be trying to strive to try and improve representation. So I commend the report, and I really hope we can start making some inroads in towards that.
Thank you, Joanne. Sheila?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm having great difficulty hearing this afternoon, but I just wanted to say, having read the report, I totally agree with what Jo has said, and I would second everything that she's mentioned. We are already doing a considerable number of these things. So, if there are any improvements to be made, yes, we need to actively be looking forward and trying to find ways to carry them out. So yes, I support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Christopher?
Thank you, Chair. Referring to Appendix A, just a couple of points to raise, really. In that third section, you've got shadowing and mentoring. I was just wondering whether or not, is that just in relation to councillors shadowing councillors, or is it officers shadowing and mentoring and shadowing councillors as well? What usually happens?
If I'm honest, shadowing them, it's a member to member shadowing and mentoring recommendation. It came really to light in 2017 as a key thing councils should be doing. The downside that the councils who did it found was they spent a lot of time training up the mentors who then didn't get re-elected. So all that training and the commitment to the shadowing and mentoring sort of fell by the wayside because there wasn't the people they needed to fall back on to deliver that going forward. So that element, I think, is something that I want to expand a bit more on in a later item when we look at the elections 2022 and the individual plans that we're going to put in place. So again, coming back to Joe's point earlier on about how we engage more widely, we've already got the candidate and agent briefing sessions built into that. We'll bring that as a discussion topic back to the committee, and we'll put more flesh on it to give the details of how we then go out and engage with those. And shadowing and mentoring for the members will be something else that we put in. How do we identify what members are willing to come forward as mentors for next year? How do we train them up? What do they need? And what would our fallback position be if those members then didn't get elected, so that we can carry on with some sort of mentoring program as soon as the elections are over.
Respect to you, Chair.
Yeah.
But it mentions further down about the chair of DSC to attend sessions to give personal experience of being a councillor to potential candidates. I wonder whether we can expand on that. I mean, for instance, if there were a load of candidates who are working mothers, for instance, should we not have somebody who's a working mother speaking to them and addressing them, so that they have a more sort of fuller understanding of what it's like to be a councillor?
Yeah, agree completely. I think again, it's maybe another thing for the item further down in looking at it at the actual commitments, perhaps in a bit more detail. But all the training we will look to offer and deliver will be delivered alongside support from the WLGA, who run a Be a Councillor campaign in the lead up to each election, with particular case studies on candidates who've been elected from different backgrounds. So there'll be other case studies to go with it. But yeah, great point. I mean, it's not limited to. It's just a recommendation that we get some personal experience from councillors attending those training sessions to give potential candidates about the commitment and the time commitment that's involved in the role. And then we can widen that scope as much as we want to from existing members who are willing to do that.
Is there any more, Christopher?
No, that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you. Is there any other questions or concerns?
No.
No? Right. What's the next one?
Response times.
Yeah. There's been a big issue raised on response times from officers coming back to members. And I've seen a couple of emails flying back and forth asking what the response time is supposed to be. And the chief executive have chucked it over to myself and the Democratic Services to discuss this. And while we are discussing this, also there is concerns about some of the equipment members have got, and it's stopping them taking part in meetings when they're on remote, where it breaks down, they can't vote, they ring in, it breaks down. So I've been asked if we can discuss them two items today and listen to what members have got to say before we take it any further. So can I open up this meeting, please, on discussion? Sheila?
Thank you, Chairman. I think a topic like this would be useful if all members had some sort of an input. Possibly could a survey be sent out so that we know what problems are currently being encountered, and then we can look at some means of sort of helping this move forward in that respect. I think, we could all give our own personal views here, of course, but I think the important matter here is for everybody to be aware that we're looking at this initially, and then if there are particular problems, we can work with officers to resolve them. I'm just thinking response times are going to vary from subject to subject. Things are going to be urgent, things are going to be not so urgent, and I'm always conscious as a local member, I don't want to be constantly filling up officers' inboxes. It would be good to have some sort of a trail where officers come back and just give us some feedback. But I think my view is the first step should be to find out what other members feel about this, rather than just suddenly trying to sort of come up with suggestions when we don't know what other people are encountering. So that's just a pure suggestion from me, that we have a survey carried out of members electronically. Obviously, it could be done quite quickly, I would think. Sorry, I've muted myself. We put it on an agenda for a future meeting. I don't know how long I was muted for, but I hope you got the drift of that.
Yes. Thank you, Sheila. Jamie?
Thank you, Chair. I've experienced some delay in getting a response from some officers. My concern is how many times do we email the same officer asking for a response before we are possibly harassing the officers? That's my biggest issue is if I usually give a week or so to hear from them, and if I don't, then I send another email and give them another week, and then I'm starting to wonder if a third email is close to harassment, if you like. I understand, I respect that they've got heavy workloads, especially coming out of the pandemic and everything else. But that is I suppose that's the question that I've got, is how close are we to harassing the officers if they don't respond to us? Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Christopher?
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm speaking now as a relatively new county councillor, but I can say that I've been absolutely extremely happy, really, with the response from officers in terms of the emails I've been sending them. Most of them are answered more or less, within a day, I would say. So I've been really happy so far. Whether that continues, I don't know. I mean, and to give you a sort of broader context of that, I have one constituent who sort of surprises me every week with a completely new topic to look into them for them. So it's quite a range of inquiries I've been asking of officers. So I'm very impressed with their response. Although I do agree with what Sheila said about perhaps it might be a good idea to have a member survey to see how everyone is feeling about that.
Right,
Thank you.
Thank you. Joanne?
Thank you very much. My experience has been extremely varied. There are some officers who are incredibly quick to respond and very thorough in their response, and also very willing to arrange extra meetings. And then there are other times in which you do feel like you are sending emails into black holes, which can be somewhat frustrating. So I agree with Jamie that you tend to wonder whether you're asking too many times, and what is an appropriate level of response before something should be escalated up to maybe the officer's line manager, for example. So it's what the actual pattern needs to be, how members should be able to judge it, what is an appropriate amount of time to wait before you should expect to get a response, and then how many times should you chase an individual officer before you actually then escalate it up to somebody who is more senior to then understand why you might not be getting a response. And those are the sorts of things, I think, having some sort of framework laid out, explaining to us what we can expect from officers and what we should then also be able to hold them to account for would be really useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew?
Chair, thanks very much for allowing me to come here. I'm conscious I'm not a member of the committee itself. So the first thing I wanted to say was I experienced the same thing as well. I don't want there to be an idea that there is a member officer issue here. So sometimes a lack of response is something that I will experience and others will in the organisation. I imagine there's a variety of reasons, and some of which will be more acceptable than others. In terms of I don't think Councillor Traherne will ever amount to harassment, because it is set out in the Constitution that we as officers are duty bound to provide members, with information upon request. I forget off the top of my head, and it's within the members and employees. It's not code of conduct, but it's set out within the 5th part of the Constitution, which sets out what councillors should expect to receive in terms of a service. But in terms of escalating, I'd hope, I suppose, given that we all effectively work for the same organisation and more importantly the same county, that if you reach a point where you're not satisfied with the speed of response, then you escalate it to a line manager. I think that's perfectly reasonable, and it's exactly the steps that I would take as well. So I'm not sure that there's a definitive timescale set out, but I just wanted to reassure members, it's not just something you experience. There can be myriad reasons why it's difficult to get hold of people. B, there is a duty for officers to provide information to you, but C, it's reasonable to escalate it if you get to a point where you don't feel that you're getting a sufficient response.
Thank you, Matthew. Jamie?
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back. I just want to clarify. I've had with Joe, I've had various varying degrees of response times, and normally the responses are pretty quick. It's rare that I get delays in people coming back. And going back to Matt's comments about harassment, I find it very difficult to. I'm quite a reserved person, and I'm quietly and softly spoken, and I find it hard to be aggressive, if you like. Was probably the wrong word, but to stamp my authority. So it's not easy for me to say to somebody, look, I emailed you a week ago, you haven't responded. And there are councillors out there that are quite comfortable in that approach as form of communication, I suppose. So it's trying to balance it out. Normally they're pretty good, but there are rare occasions where it does take a while. And I don't want to damage that relationship between myself and that officer by escalating it to the line manager, because then it would, I feel, have the potential to deteriorate my relationship with not only that officer but that department, and then it feeds through to MCC. So I'm quite conscious of maintaining a good relationship whilst trying to understand their workload, but I'm not as forward-coming as others, and that's where I find it difficult. And I apologise for the background noise, but they're cutting the grass. Sorry, thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Jamie. I'm going to fetch John in now.
I think, thank you, Chair. I think, we can send a survey around, no problem, just to see what the extent of the issue is. We've had obviously a bit of a mixed bag of responses there. The key thing for me is how do I know when members are having issues, and what can I do to help? if I'm not being told that there's an issue with your response times, then as far as I'm concerned, there isn't a response until we're having this conversation today. So what I'll ask is, in the short term, in particular, until we get this survey out and get some responses back, but then continuing into the long term as well, that if you're feeling like you're not getting a response from a member, from an officer, sorry, and you don't want to do that chasing, then let me know, because then we can take it up from an officer's perspective. You know, Matt as my line manager can chase it up at an SLT level with them, but it's not the member involvement. Then we've got a problem with potentially officers not responding to members as they should be. But I need to know about it is the key thing I'm trying to say there. So please do send them through to me, and let me do that chasing for you, or my team do the chasing, and then we can identify where we've got blockages and deal with that appropriately as we need to in the background.
You all happy, members, with the response?
Yes, Chair. I suppose, without having to look to the document that Matt referred to, how long should we give before we expect a response?
And I checked with I checked with our customer services team, and there isn't a dedicated sort of defined response period within the policy as it stands that that you should receive a response from an officer. That's the public and officers. There's no separate definition between the two. They are reviewing that policy, and I've probably recommended that perhaps as a committee we need to consider that draft policy when it comes to us to make sure that it suits members' needs, or there's enough content in there possibly for members. I think the reality is we just need to make sure that we haven't got those blockages in the system in the first place to be having the conversations to worry too much around what a policy says. But again, feeding those back into me where there's an issue, let us deal with it in the way we need to do it, and identifying where those issues are. And hopefully that'll just free the system up, and you'll get the responses that you need without worrying about what a policy is. But there's no defined response period as yet.
Can I fetch Sheila back in, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry to come back in, but
It's all right.
this really is going to be helpful for item 9 on the agenda when we're looking at elections 2022, because I think that a useful tool would have been, and I know I've mentioned this before, but a directory that we can, as a new member, it would be useful for our new members to have a directory, which I would have found particularly useful, to ensure we're going to the correct officers. I know Democratic Services has been very helpful when I haven't really known who to approach for a particular problem, but that in itself takes up time when you're trying to locate the correct officers. So I think that would be helpful for all of us, but in particular, as I said, it would be useful for new members. I know I tend to use the address book on the emails now because I find that's probably the quickest way to find things without bothering anybody. But yes, I agree with what's been said previously. Yeah, I still think it's a good idea. And this is all going to be most beneficial for 2022 when we do have some new colleagues and new members. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Anybody else want to come in?
I'll just send the survey, man.
Huh?
I'll just send the survey.
Right, John said he'd be happy to send the survey around and see what responses we get back. Thank you very much. What's the next one?
Elections 2020.
Elections 22 is the next one on the agenda.
And that's me.
That's John.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, you've got a report there in front of you, I think, which will set out pretty much our work plan for the next probably 10 months or so, I suspect, as we lead into the elections next May. I think it's important as a committee that we start to consider the needs of what the next set of elected members are going to be. linking that back into the diversity pledge that we discussed earlier on. How can we promote the election, promote candidates to come forward? What are the resources and expectations that newly elected members are going to have and need from us as a council? So just trying to lay out some key topics that we can consider as a committee over the next couple of meetings that will take us towards the end of 2021. Just looking at some of the key things that we need to consider. So we'll look at what the diary looks like for meetings post-election 21-22, whether we've, how quick can we start business back up, but how quick can we train our members up whilst not overburdening them at the start. And I think we need a detailed plan on the council diary and the induction programs and training we can do through there. Feedback we've always had at previous elections is the induction program is too much too soon. I can't say I disagree with that. The trouble is the longer it takes to get through the necessary training for all members, the longer it takes for the council decision-making processes to stand back up and start making decisions. So, for example, everyone's got to have their code of conduct training. We've got to get that done straight after the election. Planning and licensing committees, they have to do their planning and licensing training before they can make a decision on the committee. So that's two things we have to do straight off the bat, straight after the election, before we can start meetings up. I think, today's meeting as an example, and the technology changes that have come in, they offer new opportunities for us ahead of next year's induction program. What can we do online to save people travelling to County Hall? It reduces our climate footprint. As well as giving a bit of flexibility to members around when they can undertake some sessions. We could do it maybe later on in the day if people have still got work commitments, etc. What do we need to do face-to-face? What's mandatory? What's optional? And I think I'll put a full plan together for the committee to start to consider around those. Like I say, we'll look at the pre-election activities that we've already spoken about, the candidate and agent briefing sessions ahead of next year's elections. Who do we invite to those? What members do we get to give their experiences to candidates? What am I missing? What else do we need to do to be able to bring as many people to stand for election as possible next year? Members IT, I think we've been pretty lucky this term, or either lucky or planned it well, but the equipment that we dished out to members in 2017 has stood the test of time. It's still working now. It's worked through COVID, all the changes and pressures we put on them there. I think we're in a good place with our IT at the moment as it stands compared to where we have been in the past. But what are you going to need for the next term? Those devices you've got are 5 years old. They're probably not going to last the next term. So what is it that members need from there? So we'll probably look at a members survey of what their needs are. What does that look like? We'll bring that to the committee. Let you tell us what the survey should ask of members, and we'll let Digital present us with various options of devices that can suit members' needs. What the welcome pack looks like, e-learning, and then again, just at the bottom there, we've got mentoring and shadowing as another topic that we can look at going forward. So what I'm looking for there from members really is, have I missed anything that we need to consider in the next 10 months as a committee? Anything we want to look at in a bit more detail? And then I'll start putting the timetable and plans and bringing them as a standing item on the agenda to every meeting, so that we can make sure we're covering off all the points we need to ahead of next year's election. So I'll open it up to members really, if to let me know what I'm missing. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Any questions to John? There's nothing coming in the chat.
Yep.
Oh, and
Maureen.
Maureen?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I hope you don't mind me coming in on this one as well. When you were talking, John, about having the first sort of big meeting when people get together and get to know each other, and you were talking about it maybe online, I would think if it's at all possible that we can meet in person. For new members to have to go online at the start, I would think would be wouldn't be as beneficial. If possible, if health and the state of the country allows, I think it would be much better if all the members, new and old, could meet together in person, at least for one day anyway, to mingle, get to know each other, and you know, help each other out with different queries and things. I don't know what the rest of the members feel.
Do you want to answer that, Jim?
Yeah, I agree completely, Maureen. I think the first few sessions need to be face to face. We have to do some face to face because you've got to sign your declaration of acceptance of office in person with the chief exec. So there's some elements we're going to have to do physically. I think given that the induction program can go on for so long, in terms of online sessions, so one request we've already had is for our emergency response team to do a session with members. It's more information sharing rather than you know, getting to know people. And these are the sorts of sessions that I think maybe further down the line in the induction program we can push online. Officers and members can still see the faces of the officers then who are responsible for it, but it just gives members a bit more flexibility in their schedules as how they can join some things. So there'll be the key elements, I still see us doing it face to face. How, that I'll worry about that as we get a bit closer to the time, but they will still need to be face to face elements. Other ones we can look to push online, and again, it comes back to what do we consider as mandatory training, what do we consider as optional, and I think it's more those optional ones that we can start pushing online as remote sessions, just to give members that flexibility.
Thank you, John.
Any other questions? There's nothing in the in the chat there. Right, is it? I think that's it. Unless there's any other. Sorry, no, it's not coming up.
If you spotted it, that's okay. It's a few technical issues this afternoon.
It's
I
weather.
just wanted to point out that what mentioned in the previous session about diversity of mentors in particular, that I, as a new councillor, I was helped greatly by members from all parties. Monmouthshire is such a friendly council, and being a new councillor is a little bit overwhelming. And I found I had great support from the councillors without having to ask for it. They were there for me. And I think mentoring will sort of come naturally to you know who to ask and who will support you. So it would be nice to have specific mentors, but I do feel that that is something that Monmouthshire is very good at anyway, because of the way all members you know, get on so well. Meeting dates, I think it's important that any new member is aware that this is constantly reviewed. We've discussed this many times over the past 4 years in democratic services, and that message just needs to be, you know, loud and clear that all meeting dates can be reviewed and are constantly reviewed to enable people not to be put off by not thinking they would have the time or it would be flexible enough for them. We have to be flexible. I mentioned the directory. That would be, as I said, that would be particularly useful. Something I didn't say was, I think if that's proving difficult to sort of do, a directory to start with, and then the onus could be on members to keep that up to date themselves, because obviously I do appreciate that you know, personnel change from time to time, but the onus could be on us if we just had a weekly update or monthly update, and the onus is on to keep that up to date. I congratulate you, John Pearson, and your team on everything you've done to enable us to continue meeting remotely, and that is the way of the future, and that will assist people with their ability to go forward as members, to be flexible and know that they can do things remotely. And obviously, we spend a lot of time now in these remote meetings, and it is a lot easier to be able to you know, have a good attendance. I think as much, you know, the induction sessions is important that they be recorded so that we can't all make it on a particular day and time. I'm sure that's something you've got in mind, but I would just like to stress how useful that is as a new councillor to be able to go back and look at a recorded seminar that you may have missed, or you may have attended and you just want to refresh your memory. So all of these things, all of this technology that we've got is being put to good use, and I hope it will continue. Well, it will continue, obviously, but we need to just support any new members. If we come back ourselves, then obviously we will support them with you. But it's good to know that we've had the support ourselves throughout all of this, the last 4 years and throughout the pandemic, and we've all managed to have good attendance. We've managed to have good attendances at our meetings and be kept informed. So thank you. I just wanted to make those few comments.
Thank you, Sheila. Has anybody else got any comments? No? No? Well, that's it. That's the end of the meeting. And the date of the next meeting is when? Pardon? 12th of July. Right. Thank you very much. Sorry.
I've been asked to request an item on the next agenda. Would this be an appropriate moment?
Right.
Yeah, a couple of councillors have asked me if we could have a discussion regarding prayers at full council meetings.
Right. Yeah, I don't blame you, because there is some members are for it, and there's some members which don't want it. So yes, I agree to accept that on the agenda for the next meeting.
Could I also ask, did we nominate a vice chair? Would you like? I'm quite happy to nominate Councillor Jehan if he's willing to do so.
Well, if he's willing to do so, I'm quite happy to accept his name.
Thank you. If I'm allowed, then yes. But if I'm not, I'd like to nominate David Jones. To put a spanner in
David
the
Jones
works.
was about to second Jamie Trehan as Jamie Trehan's nomination.
Right, thank you, David.
So if I'm allowed, yes, Chair.
Jamie, it looks like you are the vice chair. Looking forward to working with you. Thank you. Right, that's it then. Thank you very much.
Have we agreed the minutes of the previous meeting?
Oh, I haven't got.
Just to formalise that.
Sorry, David. I haven't got that on here. Can we agree the minutes of the last meeting?
Certainly, no problem at all.
Yeah.
Thank you, David. Jamie. Second, third. Right, thank you very much. Thank you. Bye. Bye.